Hello everyone and welcome to Stitch of Fate. Today we're going to be talking, Dot and I, about some basics of the Vampire the Masquerade universe to explain the weird things that we do as vampires.
It's like a Kindred 101.
Yeah. We get a little down and dirty on the basic details of how we operate and why we do the things we do. So,
why are things weird and why can't we have cell phones? And we're just going to answer some questions, really, and try to fill in some blank spots.
Yeah, absolutely. So to begin, Vampire the Masquerade is a setting in the world of darkness, which is a dark modern fantasy game about a universe in which conspiracies of vampires, mages, werewolves, supernatural beings in general exist and operate in the shadows and behind the veil of what we would understand as reality. And that's where Vera definitely operates.
This is true. It's how she gets away with what she does. And that world encompasses all kinds of monsters. Might be the term you'd use. In this case, we're focusing on one of those monsters, which are Kindred or vampires.
We have a lot of rules about exactly how they physically operate and also politically. It's a game about political power, positioning, posturing, other P's. And Power, yes.
There's another one, yeah.
And I think to explain some of that, we're going to go through the terms that we've covered in the show already, and also the traditions of what keeps a vampire safe and why they need to do that. So vampires have to pretend that they don't exist. They have to cover their tracks.
We have to convince everybody else we don't exist.
Oh, well, yeah.
We're actively working to try to convince the rest of mundane society that we aren't here. Because if we are, then we're a problem. And they outnumber us.
And there are things like vampire hunters in this reality who are powerful and scary and occasionally backed by the government. And
or local police sometimes get backed by them. Or you can have this kind of the SI, the Second Inquisition, which hopefully Mathis does not bring into this game because I hate them so much. The Second Inquisition, their down and dirty goal is to wipe us out, along with other monsters that also feel like Kindred need to be wiped out.
Yeah. They use fire and technology and brute force and all of the
Sometimes
same tactics
holy
we
power.
do.
Yeah.
They try and root us out, and they try and kill us, which is why during the First Inquisition, which is what we know in real life as the Spanish Inquisition, during that era, which wiped out a lot of vampires, the rules of the masquerade were established, and 5 traditions were written down so that everyone had to follow these rules on pain of death to keep vampires, the Kindred, a secret. So, God, what are they? There's 5 of them, and I can never remember what they are.
Yes, there's six traditions.
Oh, there's 6.
6 traditions.
Well,
there's 6 traditions.
First mistake.
Sean's winning already. So, the first tradition, and I've got my book for reference, for both those of you in audio and video world. So, the first one is the Masquerade, which is the Masquerade is not revealing your true nature to those that don't share kindred blood.
Very simple. But
Very simple.
It's harder than you would think.
And it has a follow-up. Doing such shall renounce thy claims of blood, which means if you do it, we can kill you.
Yeah.
You don't get to exist within the kindred society anymore.
Yeah, and
that is.
Vampires exist in like a almost feudal strata. So there's the old vampires, powerful vampires on top, and the less powerful vampires at the bottom. And they enforce this killing rule.
Yeah, and that brings up a good point too, which is we haven't really dived in yet But Sean started asking some questions about how old his coterie was. And I think that is important because the older you are, the more powerful your blood is. I think is like what you as audience should know is like, if you're a much older vampire, the potency of your blood is way more powerful, which makes sense. And we'll get into why that matters here in a second, specifically for Sean.
But yeah, I mean, that is specifically the reason why Sean can't have a mobile phone or shouldn't.
Right.
Because in that instance, if, for instance, an FBI agent starts tracking their numbers or plugs them into some sort of surveillance system, then we will start...
a photo of, I don't know, a giant massacre where man's head was taken gets up on the cloud and leaked out somewhere, and now you've got proof of like some religious cult that some police station's going to look into. Now you've got a big old masquerade breach, and Sean dies.
Yeah, I was going to say and the rest of them, but no, it would just be Sean.
No, it would just be Sean, and I think that really just shows you the stakes at which these people have to function. Like these kindred have to function at such a high capacity of knowing like how to place themselves in the world, and that comes into play in almost every decision that they make. How they do their business, how they dress, why Vera only stays in her own club, right? Why Duke lives in a back room. Like these things matter. Okay,
one of my favorite examples, quickly, is that it is a masquerade breach not to wear socks, because wearing socks is a thing that normal people do.
Yeah, it's like, be as normal. Yes, be as normal as possible.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Okay, so the second tradition is your domain.
And domain is something that we've mentioned, but the Drac Pack have control over a portion of New York in Brooklyn that they have, before the story began, fought for and bargained for and made trades so that they can take control of it and operate it as they want. Within reason.
Ours. Yeah, within reason. Of course, we still fall under, what we'll talk about, but we'll fall under some things. But as the tenet states, or as the tradition states, your domain is your own concern. All others owe you respect while they're in it, and nobody may change your world while they challenge it, like while they're in it. So basically, it's yours, it's your space, as long as you hold it. Vera can take a man's hand in her basement.
But
for breaking her rules.
On the flip side, we stray into someone else's territory, and they can do the exact same thing to us with no repercussions, in the same way we would.
So the stakes are also high when you're interacting with other kindred. Anytime you're interacting with other kindred and you're in their space. All right, what's the next one, Josh?
This is, I think, specific to our backstories, but the third tradition is the progeny. Thou shalt only sire another with the permission of thine elder. If thou createst another without thine elder's leave, both thou and thy progeny shall be slain. Don't make more vampires. Not unless you got permission.
Not unless you got permission. And a lot of people are like, but why? Like, wouldn't it be a great idea for vampires just to take over? Well, we survive off of humans, and if there are too many of us, we could overpopulate and not have enough food. We could draw too much attention to ourselves. Werewolves could come eat our faces. Like that. These are real concerns when you start like making too many of you.
And then there are the political concerns, which is, does your prince want you to have a powerful minion such as a vampire? Or should you be relegated to using persuasion and manipulation of your own, or the humans that you control?
And a lot of kindred, have problems with their sires because they were brought into this horrible life where they're slowly losing their humanity and will remain a monster for all eternity. Like, not everybody's cool with that. Some of them are sired under dire circumstances or in ways where a choice was not available or made available. And so there can be a lot of drama in this third tradition, is what I guess I'll say to that. And I think that's actually really relevant to our story in particular.
Yeah. I think every single person in this has a very unique relationship with the person who created them, turned them into a vampire and brought them into the night.
Right, and I think if you think of VTM as a political game, which it is, a politics game, and if the blood potency, the earlier the generations are, begins to get less and less, maybe you begin to end up with more problems than just overpopulation. I'll just leave it at that. Well, cough, cough.
I'm
we'll
not going to encounter any problems there. I don't know what you're talking
about. Tradition 4. The accounting. Those thou create are thine own children. Until thy progeny shall be released, thou shalt command them in all things. Their sins are thine to endure. Why do you think Vera asked if poor little Grant had a sire?
Yeah, God, the poor bugger.
Because she could have gone to his sire and taken his hand.
Yeah. Yeah, he was post-teaching stage, and therefore responsible for himself. But if you want to be careful, you got to go up the chain. And this is, I think, more specifically why Sean's existence is a problem. But that's all I'm going to tell you.
That's all you get of that for now. But yeah, I think there's that's also another reason why a lot of vampires don't want to sire, because then you've got some little shithead who's your responsibility. Could you imagine ending up with a Sean?
No, I would hate that.
Right. And so there's this there's also that responsibility that comes with it, that thing under your power is also, you pay the price as much as they do.
How did Vera deal with Sean? I don't know, but she did. She had the patience.
She's learning the patience. She's learning. All right, tradition 5 there, Josh.
That is hospitality, Doc. Honor one another's
Vera's
domain.
Full of that.
When thou comest to a foreign city, thou shalt present thyself to the one who ruleth there. Without the word of acceptance, thou art nothing. It centralizes power at the top. If you rule a city, which we do not, we only have a block or two, you can say who exists and who doesn't, fundamentally, in the vampire world. It is partially to make sure undesirable people don't come into your borders, but it's also a method of accounting exactly who exists.
Who wants some vampire sneaking around gaining power without your knowledge when you're the king? Remember that, like, hierarchical dictatorship like mentality of, like, there's a person at the top, and we'll talk about the Camarilla and like why that is, but there's like a person at the top, and that's, you go city to city, you gotta answer to that person.
Absolutely.
While you're there. It goes back to the other tradition of domain.
Yeah.
Because their domain is the whole city.
And I think all of these rules are interlinked and bendable in way. They're not set in stone. If you can get away with it, then why wouldn't you?
Well, that actually brings up the perfect segue into the 6th tradition, which is destruction. Thou art forbidden to destroy another of thy kind. The right of destruction belongeth only to thine elder, and only to the eldest among thee shall call a blood hunt. A blood hunt being take their head, whoever, wherever, however. Yep. As long as you don't break the masquerade.
Well, that's the first rule for a reason, but yeah.
Right.
All of these
and you
are
see the cycle.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, how do you think lower generation vampires rise in blood potency?
How do they gain power when
they sure don't do it by eating mortals?
Yes.
Yeah. They don't. They don't do it by eating mortals. They do it by eating each other. So I think that begs. That's like that. It's like recognizing where and how you break the rules in Vampire the Masquerade. Everybody breaks the masquerade. You to get a ghoul, you have to tell some mortal, or you could, I guess, choose not to. But
or
you
like
have
a familiar in
like a familiar.
What we do in the shadows.
What we do in the shadows. A familiar. You have to have a mortal that serves you, and so you have to tell them about your lifestyle.
Which breaks the rules.
And in doing so, you break the first rule.
But there are ways to make sure that they are wholly committed to you.
Yes.
In unpleasant ways, let's say. It's
Yeah. There are all kinds of ways. A mortal drinking the blood of a kindred is very addictive, and necessary to maintain like that relationship over a period of time. So there's also like a bonding process that happens. So with all of this now knowledge, this masquerade is supposed to be upheld by all kindred. But there are some factions, right, Josh, that appear, and we're underneath the Camarilla specifically, which is what we'll talk about today.
It's a feudal and fatally flawed, intentionally for the purposes of this game, faction that operates in a very authoritarian manner. It will spy on you if it can and has to, much like we've encountered, just to make sure you're following the rules. It will do all sorts of horrible things to make sure people are doing what the person at the top wants. And that person who rules the city is the prince.
Dun dun dun.
Bum, bum, bum. We talked about the prince in passing, and you will find out exactly who she is and how powerful she is. But I think it's oh god, I don't know. It's just a hot.
Yeah, it's a hot mess of a situation. It's like taking Game of Thrones and ripping away any humanity, which is in and itself difficult, right? So you've got these you're gonna have other coteries, you're going to have very, very powerful ancient vampires all vying for these seats of power in the Camarilla. The top, as Josh said, being Prince, right? But then under that, there's a lot of other things. We've talked about the Primogen Council.
Yeah.
This being a council that keeps the prince in check to some degree, right? That's kind of a checks and balance system. But then, of course, this council is always vying for the seat of Prince. Everybody on it wants to be Prince. So there internally is just a constant political struggle. And the council has a seat for every clan.
Yeah. And what people may not realize is unusual about this particular council, all the clans are represented, and that includes thin bloods like Sean, the Primogen who arrived at the Succubus Club to meet with the coterie, with the group, was, oh god, what's his name? The thin blood Primogen, Robert Larson. We go.
Robert, yep.
Robert Larson is an anomaly in that thin bloods are generally despised for their idiocy, youth, what have you.
Being able to, walk in daylight, to be a sign that vampires are changing and our blood has thinned enough to only be half what we were. They are a sign of future days, y'all. And of the death of Kindred.
Yeah, no one that has existed for 1,000 years is particularly excited about things changing.
This is why there's so much tension around Sean being a thin blood, because the politics and around just what thin blood represent as like the passing of time, this morphing of Kindred after thousands of years doesn't settle well with everyone.
No. If you don't understand it, you are more likely to hate it. And that is a lot of what older vampires think about Sean and vampires like him. So he is probably in a better position than most because he has a connection with and is represented by a council member, the Primogen, who is of the same clan as he is. So, what? Who else did we meet? We met Arturo.
Met the Arturo,
Harpy.
yes, the Harpy. The Harpy is kind of the information broker.
Yeah, it's like an unofficial position. You become a Harpy by being really good at gossip.
Yes. You know enough where your power lies in people like the Prince having to come to you for information. So you inevitably rise to power because information is power.
You're Gabby. That's
Gabby. Yeah, hella Gabby.
And I think we got that impression from Arturo when we went.
Yeah, Mathis really nailed that. And so again, even his distaste for Sean in that moment of just there. Some cities don't even allow thin bloods. It is a kill on sight kind of situation.
Oh, yeah.
There is an ongoing blood hunt against thin bloods.
Yep.
New York is an anomaly in that there is actually a thin blood primogen. That's like a whole other thing.
Don't even understand why. None of us do, but I guess we're going to find out when.
Yeah, the prince seems to have a soft spot for it. Yeah, so I have no doubt there's going to be something there.
It is weird, but it's cool.
It is weird. But so you've got the prince and like this council that helps balance it, but there's a lot of other positions under it. We've mentioned the sheriff, who is basically the person that shows up to do. If you did wrong, the sheriff will come knocking.
Yeah, vampire police.
Vampire police,
but a bit
basically.
more brutal and.
Yeah, less forgiving.
Yeah, less forgiving. Yes.
Yeah.
I
was starting to see those are the big ones. Oh, and then of course we visited the Tremere.
Oh yeah. So we mentioned all of the different vampire clans, which are sort of like families, grouped by blood and powers. They are all represented in the city, and one of those clans is the Tremere. They are blood mages and can do all sorts of extraordinary rituals and magic with their potent vitae blood.
Which is why Duke took that information about a blood, like a ritual that was done that we didn't know anything about, to the Tremere.
Because they are that kind of source of information. And they went to their kind of safe house. It's a magical chantry is what they call it.
Yeah, they call it the Chantry. The Chantry! It's a super secret place that holds a lot of information that could have a lot of masquerade breaches.
Which is why these powerful mages protect that place with their blood magic. It will be protected by rituals and wards and all sorts of horrible things that if you go in and you're not invited in, you're probably going to fall foul of, which is why it was good that Duke had a friend there.
That's true.
So there are so many wonderful aspects to this world and so many deep depths that we can plumb in various ways.
Yes.
Not only world building, but also the characters themselves. But I feel like what we tried to do here is teach you about what some of the terms, why things happen the way they do, and perhaps in the future we'll do one of these again, but let us know.
This at least sets the stakes for you. Yeah, let us know how we did, and if you've got other questions, because
more questions we will be more than happy to answer, so that you can follow along with Stitch of Fate really easily.
Yeah, we should have Mathis on one of these because he's like a fount.
Brain
just
explosion
a fount of World of Darkness knowledge.
Yeah.
I still feel I'm such a fresh lick to all of this. See what I did there? So for the rest of you fresh licks out there, let us know. Yeah.
So thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. But until next time, goodbye.